Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael in for Fran Stoddard. The 1960s were a time of significant change all across the country and here in Vermont. The anti-war and back to the land movements brought young people to the state. In 1968, one of those young people was Bernie Sanders. 13 years later, Sanders would be elected the mayor of Burlington as an independent candidate. Another candidate at the time was Greg Guma. But Guma dropped out of the race, saying he would not run against another progressive. Sanders, of course, is now a household name. And Greg Guma recently authored a new book on Vermont history. Students in UVM's Center for Research on Vermont sat down with Guma to talk about his book.
Hi, I'm Sarah Blow, and I'm here with author Greg Guma to discuss his latest book, Restless Spirits and Popular Movements of Vermont History. Greg, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
And so, talking about your latest book, Restless Spirits and Popular Movements, what inspired you to write this?
Well, I've been working on this book for a long time, in a certain sense, for at least 45 years, from the mid-'70s, when I ran a bookstore in Burlington and we published a magazine. And during the bicentennial, we felt that there needed to be another version to the American story, one that featured women, labor movement, the one that focused on class and economic issues as much as on rah-rah patriotism.
Yeah.
And so we published what is in a way a monograph, which is still available, called Vermont's Untold History. Howard Zinn had just published The People's History of the United States, and this was in that spirit. So that's when I first started to think about writing history, and also how to write about history, and what were the stories that get told, and what are the stories that don't get told, or get told in a different way.
This book is an attempt to revisit Vermont's past with fresh eyes. Can you elaborate on this, and why do you think this is important?
Well, I think it's important now because there are a lot of the themes in history are things that we're still experiencing. When I wrote about the religious revivalism, and I wrote about the Millerites, who were a millennial cult, which sort of thought the end of the world was coming. That reminds me very much of Trump right now, and the cult nature of the politics of the time. The cultural divisions in the chapter on Bennington when I was just in my 20s. There was a culture war there, and the culture war there was centered on the schools. And right now in America, there's a big, deep political struggle over curriculum in the schools and what is taught and what should be taught. Mm-hmm. Very similar to what I saw here beginning in the 1960s. These are recurrent historical phenomena, trends, and how Vermont responds to it is not the same as how every place else responds to it.
There's an entire chapter in your book dedicated to just stories about Bernie and your relationship with him. Can you tell me a bit about this chapter?
Yes, well, I mean, there's not so much about my relationship with Bernie, although that's covered more in the first book that I wrote about Vermont, which was called The People's Republic, Vermont and the Sanders Revolution, in which I really focused on Vermont in the 1970s and in the 1980s. This chapter revisits that at the beginning of the chapter to describe how he came to power, the forces that were at work that brought him into office. One of his critical campaigns during the 1980s against Madeline Kunin, who had just become governor, the first woman governor in Vermont history, and Bernie ran against her in 1986. The campaign he did not win, but said a lot of interesting things about the evolving nature of Vermont politics. And then I focus on his political career since he went to Congress in 1990, and in particular on his presidential run in 2016, how he came to run, how he decided to return to the Democratic Party after being a critic of it for many years, and the nature of his accomplishment and what his political style is. And we have known each other for a long time, but this book is an attempt to put him in a broader historical context rather than in a personal context.
And so what's another one of your favorite chapters, and what's it about?
Well, I like the chapter on the Green Mountain Parkway, which we also sort of turned into a segment in the Vermont movie, which was a documentary by Nora Jacobson. And I like it because it doesn't fall into it's hard to pigeonhole. Now, the Green Mountain Parkway was a proposal in the 1930s to build a parkway from the south to the north up the Appalachian Trail, right on the ridge of the Green Mountains, 250 miles. The federal government was willing to pay for most of it, although they would have owned a strip of land up the middle of the state. It was viewed as a progressive move by a lot of people, as bringing Vermont into the 20th century, modernizing, getting us out of the, quote, mountain mentality. But a lot of people didn't like it and felt that it would destroy Vermont's unique environment. And I find that an interesting story, and still confounds our understanding of what is progressive. It asks a lot of interesting questions.
And what do you hope people will get out of this book when they read it?
Well, I'm hoping to convey a sense that there is something unusual about Vermont. I don't know if I am a Vermont exceptionalist, but I do think that the state has an unusual history, its scale, its environment, its location, a lot of things. And I believe that as a result of that, there is a set of values that have emerged that are common to Vermont. And I try to identify them through stories, through individuals, and through movements. And I try to tell stories that have either not been told or perhaps misunderstood in some cases, and sort of combine a sensitivity to the issues that are on people's minds today: race, class, equality, local control, what is the nature of democracy, and what is special about Vermont's version of it.
Well, I'm so excited to read it. And when will it be available to the public, and where can it be found?
Well, I think you'll be able to get it in most bookstores, or bookstores that want it, online certainly, through the publisher, White River Press, through the University of Vermont, online through, the usual sources. We're hoping that the bookstores and the libraries in Vermont will enjoy it and want to stock it.
Wonderful.
The online address is vermontresearchbooks.org. And special thanks to UVM's Center for Research on Vermont and to student director and editor Aidan Seipke. Our cold winter weather tests even the warmest of clothing, but now a homegrown fiber can help counter the cold. Rebecca Gollin tells us more in this story from our Across the Fence archives.
This is milkweed. It's a wildflower that's found in Vermont and around the Northeast. It's long been a nuisance for farmers, growing readily on roadsides and in backyards. But it's a favorite of pollinators, especially monarch butterflies, who lay their eggs and feed on the plant. Along with the environmental benefits, milkweed produces a fiber that's lightweight, water repellent, and, most important for Vermonters, it's warm.
It's great. It's very lightweight, which I really like, and it's very warm, and it blocks the wind. That's partly from the cover fabric.
What is so incredible about this particular fiber, it can be used for all sorts of different purposes. It can be stuffing inside a jacket. It can be used for flotations in life jackets.
Kimberly Hagan and Susie Hodgson work at the University of Vermont's Center for Sustainable Agriculture. They're spearheading a project that looks at the costs and benefits of growing milkweed as a crop here in Vermont. That project led them to Charlotte Sullivan.
We've done a lot of research and development. We've made a lot of different jacket prototypes. We've worked a lot with raw milkweed floss, which is the little parachutes that attach themselves to the seeds.
Sullivan is an artist and founder of the clothing company Mae West. She and her partner are experimenting with using milkweed in their jackets.
It's not a new idea, but certainly our application of it is.
Sullivan has spent time working in agriculture, and that experience informs what she's hoping to create.
As someone who always works outside, I don't like feeling like what I'm having to wear in cold weather is cumbersome, is hard to move in. I don't like having to have a lot of layers. The thought of being able to wear something that's not synthetic, that's thin and malleable and flexible, while being warm and also naturally water resistant, just seemed too good to be true.
Through the partnership with UVM, Sullivan was able to get raw milkweed fiber to experiment with. After some testing, the company is pretty close to a design that can be produced on a larger scale.
Most recently, we've also been able to start prototyping jackets using milkweed in a batting form. So what that means is it's a material that you can actually cut. It's in a roll and you can cut it out and then sort of insert it into a pattern. We've been able to make different jackets and sort of test them out and feel them and experiment with different materials. Those two were before the batting, and then Kimberly and I are wearing jackets that actually have batting quilted to the inside, on mine on the inside layer and on Kimberly's on the outside. And then these
For Hodgson and Hagen, it's still the early days in terms of figuring out the best practices for growing milkweed as a crop and other resources for farmers. Answers won't come immediately, as it takes at least 3 years to establish the plant as a crop. But these researchers think there's promise.
2/3 of the American public think using renewables is important. Most people think of renewables or they think of energy, and now people are starting to think of, actually, what about everything else we use in our house? Not just the food we buy, but let's think about the clothes that we buy and wear. Are they made in a sustainable way?
In the long run, this will be great for Vermont farmers because we have a product that grows here already, and happily so, and that we can use it.
It's a new way for farmers to diversify while giving some important pollinators the habitat they need. And while the economic results are not finalized, so far, milkweed is proving to be beneficial all around.
When I learned that there was that connectivity with milkweed and monarchs, and how, of course, with my farming background, knowing that without pollinators, it doesn't matter how much you know about growing food, you don't have anything. It was just so clear that we really had to keep working with this material and develop a way for it to be used in the market. So this is really new.
Yep.
Bringing new products to life with a sustainable fiber that could give some new options to Vermont's farmers. In Middlebury, I'm Rebecca Gullen with Across the Fence.
Stay warm, everyone, and that's our program for today. We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit Across the Fence.